What for? What?
Item 14.
Oh, are they in order? So these are just reading. These are just so that we have hard copies of them. But these would actually end up being an open session.
Okay.
Public comments. These are like the last ones after she sent us all.
Okay. 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 But these are people wanting to speak.
Yeah,
Okay.
just have to make sure that you guys have them.
Oh, I see.
Public has them.
Okay.
So then these, you can look into these. And it comes up like right away.
Good evening, welcome. I'd like to call this meeting to order. It is 6:30 p.m. Would you please join me in the flag salute?
Hand to heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This evening we have Councilmember Rollins, who is going to provide the inspiration. Councilman?
So my inspiration today is all of you. The fact that you're coming here today and that perhaps you're going to give your opinion on something that maybe we're going to be doing in the future by getting up there and talking. One of the ways that you have good government is to allow us to not operate in a vacuum, to hear what you have to say and to help make an educated decision. We hope you take that even further. We have two committees that are going to be being formed right now, an oversight committee to look over the money that's coming in through Measure U, and also the Citizens Advisory Board. So take that extra step, get involved in the community, and overall, I think we're going to be a better community. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, may I ask the clerk to please call roll call?
Councilmember Gama,
Here.
Councilmember Rollins,
Here.
Councilmember Munoz-Schnapp,
Here.
and Mayor Pro Tem Hernandez.
Here. Okay, we're now to approval of the agenda. Are there any items to be removed from the agenda? Any changes?
So, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, I'd like to pull item 14.
Okay. Can we have a motion to pull item 14? Oh, wait, you're making the motion?
Yes.
Okay, ma'am, we need a second.
I'll second that.
Or is that just on the agenda? Are we,
I think the motion's an appropriate situation.
for pulling the item? Okay. All right. So all in favor of pulling item 14?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Aye.
Aye.
Any other changes to the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda as amended.
Second?
Second.
We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. We are now at public comment. We have 30 minutes set aside for public comment. I have some slips up here specific for item 14, which has now been pulled. I have some others as well. Just remind you that you have a 3-minute time limit for presenting, and I'll go ahead and call the first sheet I have here. Becky Bruner from the museum.
Mayor Pro Tem, Council, staff. I'm Becky Bruner. I'm here representing the museum tonight. Our upcoming events on April 27th, we have Wayne Day, who's going to be talking about the day the Vikings arrived in America. On May 4th, we have Dennis O'Leary, and he will be speaking on the history of Cinco de Mayo. Also on May 4th, we have our Youth Involvement Fair, which is going to be held at the Community Center between 12 and 3. So anyone with children between the ages of 11 and 18 bring them out, see what the community offers for them to do in like sports, Sea Cadets, Police Explorers. They'll all be in attendance. On May 17th, we're having Meet Your Ventura County Supervisor at the museum. And on May 18th, we have Jose Rivera, who will be speaking about Indian Mission Vaqueros, the first Western cowboy. That's it.
Okay, thank you. I also have a speaker card for you, Becky, to talk about Friends of the Bard Mansion.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay, now I'm going to switch hats.
and we'll start the clock over.
On June 17th, we are going to be honoring two citizens. We will be giving the Citizen Exemplary Award to Captain Mike Salmon and his wife Cheryl. And we will be giving the Hueneme Spirit Award to Helen Brandt. That will be in conjunction with our quarterly dinner. And it is also being hosted by the Port Hueneme Historical Museum. Anyone who's interested, I do have our latest letter, flyers, and dinner reservation on the back table.
Okay, thank you very much. David Skriner?
Good evening. It's David Scrivener.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
It's hard to pronounce. Okay, so what I want to talk about today is the homeless situation, and specifically Oxnard and what they're not doing about it, and see if there's anything the council can do to put pressure on them. Hueneme's done a great job of dealing with the vagrants and keeping our city safe. If you walk down the beach, we've got these signs that say you're now leaving Port Hueneme. I'm glad they're there. We can tell the border. And this really cool sign that says entering an endangered area, no drones, no dogs, no camping, you'll be fined. And 50 feet on the other side of it are people in Oxnard camping. Oxnard does little or nothing about this. They've had 2 or 3 big cleanups where they've gone in there and done a bunch of stuff and left, and people just move 50 to 100 feet away, and it's a year before they do anything again. Now, personally, I've been robbed several times. I live in Surfside Village. My boat's been robbed. All my neighbors have had people breaking in their cars. We've had people jumping over fences. This is not the residents of Port Hueneme. It's these people coming in the middle of the night from God knows where. So, again, I think the policies in Hueneme are great. Police are great. I really appreciate what they do, but I don't know if there's any pressure you can put on Oxnard. But if you can, I hope you do. So that's my comment.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, this public comment session is for comments for matters not appearing on the agenda. Is there anybody else who would wish to speak?
So on this, you can allow them to speak.
Okay, if you did submit your sheet for item 14, okay. I'm sorry, did you want to speak now? Yeah, I just want to say something. Okay, could you fill one of these out when you're done? Sure. Thank you.
I just want to thank you all for not changing Port Hueneme Pier's name, because that really bothered me if you would have. Because I don't want a man's name on it. It is Port Hueneme Bay. Port Hueneme Bay is a small place. Don't take away what it is. Thank you very much for not doing it.
Because it's not on the agenda anymore. I think
Yeah, it's open, yes. Yeah, that's why.
Okay.
Yeah, so if anybody else wants to speak.
Anybody else want to speak?
You can
Okay,
just,
come on up.
you can just see if she's on here. Have her just.
Yeah,
Oh, Council, I did submit a request to speak.
you did?
Yes.
Okay, and you are?
Vivian Hernandez.
Okay. Go ahead.
Good evening, City Council members. The recommendation that was on the agenda today was to rename the Hueneme Pier after Jonathan Sharkey for his 2.5 decades of service to our beautiful city. Mr. Sharkey has done much for our city. Notably, Mr. Sharkey opposed the view tax that was proposed in 1998 and established in the writing and passing of Port Hueneme City Charter. Outside of our city, Mr. Sharkey served as chair on the Ventura Regional Sanitation District and as director of the Beach Erosion Authority for Clean Oceans and Nourishment. And of course, Mr. Sharkey also saved Shady, the city hall cat, from eviction. Mr. Sharkey's service and commitment to the city of Port Hueneme is deserving of acknowledgement and recognition. He has accomplished much during his years here, undoubtedly for the benefit of our home. There is no question that Mr. Sharkey's legacy should be remembered in this city. However, there is another legacy that we must give attention to. This legacy begins over 13,000 years ago. The Chumash people lived along this California coast for millennia. We hold a small memory of these people in the name Hueneme, a Spanish spelling of the Chumash word Hueneme, meaning resting place. Our beach was a prime fishing location for the Chumash, particularly as the Chumash held a reverence for and a connection to the sea. The Chumash believe that we are connected to the ocean, not only in a spiritual way, but in a familial manner. We know this from the Chumash creation story. As told by a ceremonial leader, the story shows how their ancestors came here across a rainbow bridge. The waters below the bridge tempted some to fall, but the earth goddess asked the creator to save them. The people were transformed into the blue dolphins, and they are our brothers, sisters, and relatives of the Chumash people. When the Chumash people died, they believed that the soul traveled back across the sea. The Chumash people share a strong bond with the sea. They did not make the pier. It was constructed in 1956, approximately 200 years after the Chumash people were suppressed by Spanish conquerors. The distinction that we give with the name Hueneme needs to be recognized. This is a reminder of of the Chumash people who came here before us. Thousands of people called these lands homes, and they are not at liberty to continue their legacy. As citizens of the city, we must represent the Chumash people and honor the foundations they established here. The roots of these Native American people cannot be erased. The legacy of an entire civilization is at stake here. We are deciding at this moment how we choose to represent the city of Port Hueneme in the naming of our landmarks, and the removing of the Chumash name from the pier when this culture had such a strong connection to the water is disrespectful to the thousands of people who lived here before us. The service that Mr. Sharkey provided to our community is worthy of recognition, but eliminating a reminder of the Chumash people is not the proper course of action. There are other aspects of our city that do not hold such powerful cultural significance. Commemorative benches and bricks can be placed along the beach. Plaques can be added to the flags with prominent city council members' names. The lifeguard towers can even be named in their honor. We have already forgotten the Clovis culture that existed in this land before becoming the Chumash. Let us not forget the historic and cultural significance of the Native American people who came here before us. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I do have sheets up here for others who are wishing to speak on the item which now has been pulled. Do those folks still want to come up and speak? Okay, I have Veronica Miranda.
I just wanted to offer you a couple of quick thoughts. I think that serving our community over 20 years is something that should be commended. He did so selfishly and he did so effectively from information that I've gathered. I think something could be done that does not include changing the name of our pier. The Port of Hueneme Pier belongs to everybody in the city. It needs to hold on to its name. There's a patch of sand in the front door. We could put a garden there, put a plaque on it. We could name these chambers, the Sharkey Chambers. There's other ways to commemorate his service without changing the name of any of our landmarks. That's all I had to say. I mean, to think outside the box. Like, look at something else. He deserves it. He served his time, but don't change the name of the pier. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Carol Ellinger.
Yes, my name is Carol Ellinger, and I would like to reiterate what the lady just said. I met Mr. Sharkey in 1990 when I moved to our community here. I've seen him on many committees, and I know him through the library and, of course, here at the chamber. And that was my suggestion. The pier belongs to the 23,900 plus citizens of Port Hueneme. I think we should keep it that way. and name this chamber after him. He spent 25 years here. People know him because of his work that he has done sitting where you're sitting now. Thank you.
Thank you. Adelia Morrow?
My name is Edilia de Leon Morrow. I've been here in Hueneme since 1957, and I'm retired from the city of Port Hueneme. Renaming the pier, what's next? Are they going to rename the port? I think it should stay with the city of Port Hueneme. You don't see Santa Monica, Santa Barbara. It belongs to Hueneme. Thank you.
Okay. And the last sheet I have is Joyce Bell.
My name is Joyce Bell, and we moved up here in June of 1956. So we're a long resident of Port Hueneme. We're very proud of our town, and that was one reason we moved here. It just breaks our heart to think that we could have a pier of the name of Hueneme taken away. We need to be proud of what we have and keep the name that was given to our facilities. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you for your comments. We'll move right ahead now to the City Council consent agenda. I will read the titles prior to the motion. We have item number 1, minutes of the regular meeting of April 2nd, 2019. Item 2, finance cash disbursements, March 16th through April 5th, 2019. Item 3, proposed road maintenance and rehabilitation projects. Item number 4, community service job classification and salary schedule. Item number 5, 2018 emergency management performance grant. Item 6, amending the Port Hueneme Municipal Code pertaining to sidewalk vending. This would be the second reading, and we'll be recommending adoption by title only and waive further reading. And then item 7, validation action regarding standby pay policy, and the recommendation is adopting a resolution approving and authorizing retroactive payment of standby and call-out pay schedules for water classification employees. At this point, I'd like to take hear a motion to approve, unless you have an item you would like to pull from the consent agenda.
I just had one that I'd like to pull just for, if anything, public conversation. That would be the Community Services Officer's job classification.
Okay, that's item number 4. Any others? Okay. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, not including item number 4?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda minus item number 4.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries.
For the public, there's 2 new positions that are being proposed, and that's for a community services officer's position. And as I've read through the report, the purpose is to provide more eyes and ears to the community at a lot lesser price than a regular police officer may have. It's not something that has been approved by budget, but the position has been approved. And so I'd like perhaps, be it the city manager's place, talk just a little bit more about that position and why it's being put out there.
Mayor Pro Tem, City Council, City Staff. I was the one that wrote the staff report for the classification of Community Service Officer. As you've read in the report, there's a number of advantages, primarily salary. We are the only department in the county not to have a non-civilian employee or non-sworn employee that works in the patrol field. Other agencies have traffic service assistants, they have community service officers, they have police service officers, and that's a classification we don't have here. And I made it my mission to add it for several reasons. There are several duties that our new community service officer can handle that our patrol officers don't need to handle now, such as cold calls, assisting with traffic collisions, doing traffic control. What people don't realize here in the city of Port Hueneme is when we have a serious traffic collision, all 3 of our sworn officers go to that traffic collision. They're now stuck there doing those duties. One is taking a report, one is doing traffic control, and another one is handling witness statements. So we're on full tactical alert during something as simple as a traffic collision. Now we have community service officers that can actually help us or help the officers with those duties so they can be more proactive or handling other assignments. Something unique to this assignment as well is our community service officers will also be trained as jail officers and be available to transport prisoners from our jail to county jail. Right now that takes an officer almost 2 hours to do that and be out of service. So a lot of our misdemeanors or misdemeanants get kicked out of our back door and back into our community as opposed to be transported to county jail because we just don't have the manpower to do it. Now we'll have a community service officer that will be able to transport these people out of our community to county jail as opposed to just giving them a court date. This includes people that have been arrested for theft, drug convictions, burglaries, misdemeanor domestic violence. I mean, the list goes on, and now these people will no longer, at least temporarily, be in our community. So that's one of the other clear advantages of having a community service officer position. And they can also assist our officers with crime scenes, and so they'll also be trained and cross-trained back in our dispatch center as well to help in our communications center. So this is a much-needed position in our department, and I wouldn't be asking for this position unless I knew it was something that we could take advantage of.
Thank you. So as we go into the budget process to make the decisions as to how to spend the money for the upcoming year, I want to thank you for at least explaining why that position at least should be considered in the future. And at this point, can I make a motion? Or no, I'm sorry.
Thank you. So will this take effect July 1, or is this a part of the next budget year? Because I'm a little confused about the timing of it in regards to the budget.
So the first step is actually creating the job classification because it's one that we haven't had yet. And the city manager and CFO have included 2 positions in the upcoming budget for these positions to be approved by City Council.
So is this in anticipation of the Measure U funds, or?
Yes, and the cannabis funds as well.
Okay. Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Sorry.
Let's roll.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
I think it's
Mr.
clear.
City
Yeah,
Manager,
so I think it's clear. But tonight, all you're really doing is approving the classification and the salary schedule. We're not asking you to actually fund the positions tonight, unlike the human resources position down later in the agenda, where we are asking you to allow us to actually fund it and move forward. This is looking forward to July 1st and the new budget year. And yes, our plan is that these would be among the first couple of positions that would be funded with Measure U revenues.
I'm sorry, I have one more question.
Okay.
Why is it on the consent agenda? It just seems to me that this is kind of a important topic that we need to discuss, and it just kind of bothers me a little bit that we have to pull it off the consent agenda because I think the public benefits from this conversation. So perhaps down the road we could look out to avoid consent unless it's a routine item, because the consent agenda is supposed to be for routine items, and this by no means is a routine item. So that's my critique.
Yeah, it's always a little bit of a debate. You know, is this something that goes on, is routine enough that it can go on consent, or is it something that should be placed on the regular business agenda for discussion? So we'll try to be more mindful of that. If it's involving maybe the potential creation of new positions or potential spending of new dollars, that we'll put that in the regular business agenda.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's important to educate the community as to how we're spending the money, so like the community doesn't have the impression that we're slipping something by them. That, you know, in fact, there's good reasons why these things are being proposed, and it's good to educate the community for that.
With that, I'd like to make a...
Okay, we have one more question.
Oh, sorry.
No.
Councilmember Schatz?
Yes. Yes, thank you, Chief, for this information. You said that we're the only city in the county that doesn't have this position, so every other city?
From Santa Paula to Simi Valley have non-sworn patrol positions out in the field.
Okay, so that would include then the sheriff's department, they would have
Absolutely.
that. And so then this person, you were thinking, as we have maybe a traffic collision and everybody's on the scene, that there would be then a sworn police officer in the community doing other things, and this person could take his or her place out there to maybe take reports and
Traffic control, or cold
interview the
calls.
people, yeah.
You know, thefts are our #1 call here in our community, and there's generally no suspect information when someone leaves their vehicle open and someone steals from it. Now the community service officer can be handling those types of calls instead of sending a sworn officer.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
All right. I'd like to entertain a motion then to approve item number 4.
I'd like to make a motion to approve item number 4, community service officer.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Item is approved.
Aye.
All right. On to our public hearing. Our public hearing is item number 8, having to do with the city's National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, Stormwater Management Program for inclusion into the Benefit Assessment Program of the Ventura County Watershed Protection District. The hearing is now open. It is 6:55 p.m. Do any members of the City Council have any conflicts to disclose regarding this particular item? None? Okay. Madam Clerk, do you have a proof of publication as required by law?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Do we have a complete file of reports and exhibits?
Yes, you do.
Do we have a complete file of reports and exhibits? Will staff please present the report? No, that was my mistake. Double vision over here.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, council, staff, members of the audience. What you have before you is a resolution to approve our inclusion into the Watershed Protection District's Benefit Assessment Program, which is essentially a collection of money that is based off of parcels within our community. And it's been established, our rate, which when the program was first started, all of the cities in the county were able to set what they felt was proper at the time for that. Ours happens to be $3. The cost per BAU across the county ranges from $3, ours being the lowest, and there's a couple of others are at that level, all the way up to $10 per benefit assessment unit. With that, the county will collect on the city's behalf money on the assessor roll, the tax property assessor roll, which I'm sure all homeowners, if you ever paid attention to your property bill, you've seen some line items on there that say NPDES, and there's a couple of different things. Some are for O&M, which is for the general operations of the county's operation, and then others that are specific to each city, which they've set that dollar amount, ours being $3. So what we are required to do in order to be able to continue to have the county collect that money on our behalf is to have our council approve a resolution saying that they wish to continue to be part of that program. And if you have any questions about any of this, I'll be happy to answer that.
Does the council have any questions of staff? Comments? Okay, and anyone from the audience wish to address the council on this matter, please come forward at this time. Okay, seeing none, we'll proceed. Do you have any further comments or further discussion?
No, this is an action that's been taken every year since 1993. Okay. If we didn't choose to include ourselves, we would lose that approximately $15,000.
Okay. So we have before us a recommendation to adopt a resolution of the City Council of the City of Port Hueneme, California, determining an assessment for the city's National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System Stormwater Management Program to be recommended for inclusion into the Benefit Assessment Program of the Ventura County Watershed Protection District. May I have a motion and a second?
I make a motion to approve item number 8.
I'll second that.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. Have our vote. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Now we're at City Council business items. We're at Finance, and we'll be talking about item number 5, Community Benefit Fund Project Update. May we have staff's presentation?
As Mr. McDonald and Mr. Tanner come forward and get ready to present, they'll both be sharing a portion of the presentation. This is just for the council's education information tonight. Several of the new council members, probably primarily Councilmember Rollins, have asked questions about the Community Benefit Fund. What's it all about? How did it get here? How much do we get? How much have we billed already to the Harbor District for projects that have been done? Is there money that is possibly available to be reprogrammed to other projects? So tonight's report will answer those questions, but again, we're not asking you to take any specific action tonight. We'll be coming back with more discussion on this Community Benefit Fund, maybe even 2 or 3 times during May and June as we deal with the additional $100,000 that came in from the last fiscal year at the port, and as we look at maybe reallocating some of those funds from previous years that have just kind of accumulated. So I'm not sure if Joe or Ken is going to start first, but they'll both be sharing a portion tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Thank you, City Council. This Community Benefit Fund project update, Community Benefit Fund was created as part of a settlement agreement with the port in October 2015. It's a series of agreements going back many years, 4 in total. Any year that the district is above $13 million in revenue, they're required to donate the $100,000 to this fund. The first 2 years of the first 2 years of the fund is at the city's discretion, and then going forward, there's a committee of city and port members that get together and kind of decide a direction for the fund, and then we'll bring that to the City Council and port board for their approval of the funds. The funds so far we spent about $78,000. To my knowledge, we have not gotten reimbursed for those funds. We did send a letter of request for those funds, and from what we understand, the reimbursement check is in the mail. So we're hopeful to get that very soon. Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. The problem we had, and if you see all the attachments that we put in with the report, is the projects were approved over different times at the council. So we tried to combine them together to get when those approvals were coming through and track through. And I know it happened before my time. They created a special fund for the Community Benefit Fund, but it wasn't really, the information wasn't disseminated around. So a lot of people were making Community Benefit Fund expenditures, and they were ending up somewhere else. So we had to do a lot of tracking and trying to find out where they were in order to make them occur. Some of the detailed sheets on there we tried to track them by how the council approved the project and then got the expenditures for those projects. So they should translate from the detail up to the summary page.
So I understand, I'd just like to make one comment. I understand the Port Hueneme Port Committee, I'm not sure if that's the correct name, recently met and discussed some priorities for spending future monies. Mr. City Manager, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think we usually thought the Port City Committee, and we have 2 members from the council that sit on the committee, 2 members of the Oxnard Harbor District that sit on that committee. Each year they discussed some recommended allocations for the new $100,000 share that's coming in, because for the last 5 or 6 years, the port has met that $13 million annual revenue threshold. So there'll be another $100,000 coming. And I don't have the percentages in front of me. I know the discussion was at least 40% of the $100,000 going to public safety projects, public safety related projects. And then there was, you know, a variety of other allocations. We'll be bringing that forward soon, if not May 6th, then May 20th, for the whole council to look at those recommendations, and we'll have the whole list of categories that were recommended. Again, it really depends on what the full council wants to do, but the two-member committee, you know, studies, discusses it, and then makes that recommendation. So yeah, that'll be coming forward in May.
Okay. Councilman Tagama.
So I'm looking at your spreadsheet, and there's a number of items. You could read them, but what I'm keying in on is the amounts that haven't been spent. And, for example, establishment of Beach Advisory Commission. So I haven't heard of a Beach Advisory Commission for quite some time, so perhaps that money could go elsewhere at this point. And as we go down the list, there's quite a bit of remaining funds that haven't been spent. So will there be a chance for the full council to get involved and maybe make some priorities and make a decision, or is it already set in stone as it's reported here?
My understanding is it's not. Like that one you were talking about was council approved in April of 2017. I didn't get here until October. And so really this exercise has been trying to find, oh, we spent it here, and trying to find out where some of these things are. So any of the amounts that are remaining, either it's spent somewhere and we haven't been able to find it yet where it was spent, or it hasn't been spent at all, it would probably be pertinent to discuss reallocating it because of the nature of where it is. If it comes out of the first 2 years in that 200,000, it doesn't need the court's concurrence, just the city's approval. But anything, the second 200,000, and then the next one that just came available, that we were notified in December, those ones we would need to get approval and then get the court's concurrence.
So we're talking $400,000 then?
Overall, and it's going to be, they have interest generated on some of those, and there's a small CPI escalator to that 100,000. I think it's roughly about 107,000 that we were eligible to spend, that they notified us in December. I thought that meant that they were paying us that, and I was kind of confused because I thought we were in the 70 or 80,000 range. Then I realized that they look at the prior year's activity and say, oh, by December, 6 months after that year, this is how much is eligible for reimbursement. So we can kind of spend that money anytime, but we can't get reimbursed until after they notify us what that amount is. But that hasn't been factored in or really approved on any council level that I'm aware of.
Okay. Councilmember Rollins.
Okay. So ultimately, of the first $200,000, actually of the whole $400,000, we've only spent about $75,000 to $78,000 that we have accounted for, right?
Yeah, we requested that 78 from the older ones.
And then at least from attending the council meetings in the past, there was a fairly large laundry list on how we were going to even spend the first $100,000 that we haven't spent yet. And then there's another $100,000, which actually I didn't realize that we had $200,000 that we have total discretion on how to spend. I would just recommend, whatever the process may be, that the existing council can look back and review at least the first $200,000 and perhaps reassess or confirm how, you know, it was to be used in the past. And then for the upcoming $200,000 that we haven't spent, while we have the committee that's going to be working with the port, there should be some process that they can come back to the council as a whole. We can digest it, we can share it kind of with the community, and then go back. I don't know what the actual steps are, but the idea behind it would be for us to all concur with this is how we'd like to go forward, and let the community somehow be involved in some input as to how perhaps they might like to see it happen too. So.
Yeah, and I have to remind you too, a lot of this that we're dealing with is all expenses that have been happened as of June of 2018. So there's even been expenses from last July to now that we haven't got reimbursement for. If you look further in the page and it says 18-19 expenditure summary, that's what's been spent in the current year. And I don't think some of that is what was requested in the 17-18 amount. So that's why it gets real confusing, because you're talking about a prior year that you can spend in a future year that you're getting reimbursement after you've spent it.
Yeah, so I remember that it wasn't very clear when this agreement was done, and so we were expecting the money to go into a trust fund that we could spend against, and instead it was where we had to expend it first and then submit for reimbursement. And that didn't get hammered out until close to the end of the first year, so it was a little confusing for us
Well, when they
back
sent us
then.
the letter in December, Rod and I looked, I said, well, that's more than, I said, it's about what we've got for 2 years, but more than what I've calculated for the prior amount. And then when I contacted the director at the port, he told me, oh no, that's what we transferred. So they have their own community benefit fund that they manage and administer. And then it was just like, oh, everything started to come to light that we're dealing with two different systems and perspectives, the cities and the ports, and trying to make those come together in something that's understanding. If you guys understand this stuff here, I really commend you, because it was very confusing trying to go through this after the fact when I got here to try and get that first dollar.
So one of the things I remember back when was where it couldn't necessarily go to fund a line item in the budget. It had to be something new, right? And so are we still going to keep to that as part of, is that part of the overall structure, or is that something that's up for discussion?
I think there's still a lot of latitude with that first $200,000 in that first year. So, you know, when we determine how much of the $200,000 is still available, and some is, the council would have pretty wide discretion to decide how to use the rest of that money. If you're talking about the more recent years, then you've got the process where both the council and the Harbor District Board, full bodies in both cases, have to approve the original allocation or any changes to the allocation. And I think what the comment you're making is they didn't want us to basically try to solve our general fund shortfall and say, we're going to plug $100,000 of our existing cost base with this new community benefit fund money. So you're right that they really were focused on, you know, these are new amenities or programs or services. We're not going to try to solve your existing general fund problem.
And I think the caveat for then the years that we have to jointly come together with ideas, it would be that it would help both organizations, the city and the Oxnard Harbor District.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, all right. So those are then some of the parameters that we work alongside when we're thinking about spending
and I
this money.
think I understand what you're saying. So as far as it being a line item, these are kind of, to a degree, maybe not, even if they have to be approved each year, one-time expenses for that particular year. So for example, I heard, say, public safety, and say that would be to purchase, say, one-time items. It wouldn't necessarily, or maybe I'm wrong, it would to hire somebody on an ongoing basis that we would incur that responsibility and pull it from the one-time benefit fund.
Exactly, yeah. The emphasis in that case would be maybe on equipment, some public safety equipment needs, maybe something at the police facility that was an improvement that would benefit public safety but was a one-time expense. Yeah, we don't want to get into staffing with this money, because you're right, it just creates an ongoing liability, and that you know, we don't know if this money is going to necessarily be there every year to support that.
And it could be used eventually as we move forward to the $200,000 that has to be jointly decided, something that both would benefit from, albeit streets and things like that. Would that be correct?
Yeah, actually,
I mean, not that that would be the final decision, but that would be something that would perhaps work.
Yeah, in fact, one of the more recent projects that we've done, Don Villafana was involved in this. A couple of the commissioners, Harbor District commissioners, were really concerned about pedestrian safety on that intersection over by the port entrance and kind of near the museum. And it gets very dark at night, a lot of close calls of pedestrians in that area. So Don installed, I believe, some lighting, and was it a lighting crosswalk or a flashing light? Flashing crosswalk, which is what the port had really wanted to see happen in that area. So that was what would be considered a capital improvement project that we use these benefit funds for. So that definitely can happen.
Okay, any other comments or questions?
No.
I just have one, and what I'm hoping for is that when we embark on the strategic planning process with ARIA Consulting, that we find a way to link this prioritization process with our objectives that we develop from the strategic planning process, that somehow we can determine how this money gets spent based on our priorities. So if we can have that kind of discussion during our strategic planning process, I think that would be very helpful. Makes sense. Okay, any members of the public wishing to comment on this item?
And I've talked to the police officer too about this. It's horrible. When they come around the corner, coming down on Scott Street, they tear down there. And all we have is a crossing there where the bus stop is that just lights up now. But I'm gonna tell you something. One day, somebody's gonna get hit because there's people with walkers. We don't have anything showing walkers, wheelchairs, nothing where we have Mar Vista. That should be there, and it's not. And we've talked about this before. And I have a walker, I watch it, but you know what? There's some of these kids that come tearing around that end before they come down by where the field and everything is. I'm telling you, someday, something's gonna happen. If you do not put more signs up there or flashing lights, something. And now you go to neighborhoods and it says, careful, older people, wheelchairs, walkers, children at play. We have nothing like that. We've talked about it when the police have been at Mar Vista. Yeah, we're gonna check that out. We're gonna do care of it. I've been there for 10 years. I haven't seen anything yet. And it's something you need to consider. Because when all we have is that crosswalk to walk there, and they come tearing around that street down the other end, I'm telling you, someday something's gonna happen. And I just think you need to really think about it, because I'm just telling you ahead of time. Okay? Because we've talked about it with the police department. We've talked about it many times. And I don't want to be the one because I'm on the walker.
And maybe, as part of the process, the item that you brought up, there's probably many other items that, while we try to be aware of everything that's needed within the community, maybe there's a way to have some kind of a wish list or a public process where people come up with various different ideas that we can at least consider when we're considering the totality of it all.
A lot of you are new. Okay?
Yes.
You're all new.
Yes, we are.
I've been there for 10 years. And it's been talked about. We've talked to the fire department. We've talked to the police department. And you go to most neighborhoods, they've got signs up there, careful, wheelchairs are around. They've got signs all over the place. We don't have it here in Portland. They said, we're going to take care of that. We're going to take care of that. I'm just bringing it up. You brought it up. I brought it up.
Thank you. Okay. Any other comments? Anybody else wishing to speak? All right, the recommendation is to receive and file this report. Thank you, staff. I think you'll need to stay seated there, though, because I think this next item is yours as well. We're moving on to item 10, the 2017-18 fiscal year comprehensive annual financial report, otherwise known as CAFR. We'll hear a presentation from our finance director and assistants, just our finance director. Okay.
Good evening, Council, Mayor Pro Tem. We have our comprehensive annual financial report, affectionately in the accounting industry referred to as the CAFR. We have it ready and prepared. Tonight, we'll have the receive and file. The council gets it, and then if there's any opportunity or anybody wants any questions, I'll be able to handle those. First, we'll start off with the compliance and achievements that we've gotten. The biggest one is we have what's called an unqualified clean opinion. That means that the auditors do not qualify or limit their representation, that all the financial information that we have in there is fairly presented. The other important compliance item is we got the other post-employment called OPEB actuarial report and valuation done as of last June. They needed that information for the notes in the statement, and that completed the financial report that we have. The achievements that we got from that, the council just recently decided to pass a resolution that was funding and adopting and funding the OPEB unfunded liability to reduce that in the future. They also have contributed to PARS trust for both PERS pension and OPEB pensions to defer those future costs too. And those were real helpful in reducing those liabilities that we've had. The main thing that we deal with in the CAFR is the governmental fund types. The main, basic, and parent one to all others is the general fund. That covers all your general activities. The enterprise funds that are business activities that cover the water enterprise, the wastewater, the solid waste, and the stormwater accounts. The capital project funds that are funding sources or funds created to account for large multi-year projects or larger than you would want to spend in 1 year. We have the debt service fund that accounts for any debts that we have and pay for those. And the fiduciary funds where we act as the guarantor for those is the redevelopment successor agency. The general fund we'll start with first. It's the most basic. It covers police services, streets, buildings, recreation, all those things. This one gives kind of a long-term historical view of our general fund balances and the revenues, expenditures, and the unassigned fund balance, which is the blue, and the total fund balance, which is the green to the right of that. That total fund balance has unassigned, which is spendable, and then items that are not spendable, like assets of streets and roads and buildings and things like that. The main thing that comprises our general fund is our revenues in there. We have mainly sales tax, property tax, and then our newest revenue source, cannabis, and Measure U, which will come available in the next fiscal year. The next slide here kind of gives a pie representation of the 2 years of general fund expenditures. The only real difference there is we were down on some of our hiring, so the salaries and benefits were down, and in 17-18 we transferred some of the street maintenance expenses to the gas tax and relieved some of the pressure on the general fund. The next one here shows our general fund reserves and how much that we maintain for any emergencies, contingencies, and whatnot there. Get into the enterprise funds next. They're on page 34 and 35 of the CAFR, and the first one is the water fund. We're going to have a water rate workshop that's coming up in the next month that will deal with how we address, how we plan to spend some of those reserves and future rates that we have in, and then so on and so forth through water, solid waste, and last but not least, any questions that anybody has.
Okay, any questions for staff? Councilmember Gama.
Thank you. I learned something when I walked in the back. You could hear what's going on here in the meeting, so I did not miss anything. I have a cold, so anyways, that's a nice little benefit that I didn't realize that there's a speaker back there. Nice. Anyways, my question. Well, the overall unfunded liability was reduced regarding the pension obligation. The yearly cost has increased. And I was wondering, I'm trying to remember, I looked over the CAFR, but what did it increase to, and
Well, the main increase is the PERS pension liability, which has the employer's percentage that increases year to year.
Right.
And that is a very complex thing that makes the OPEB report look like child's play. But they look at long-term objectives, they set revenue parameters that they will make on those invested funds that we have with those. And they've been saying over the last few years that they're projecting in the next 5 years that we'll have very large increases. So that's the reason why we're accumulating funds to deal with some of those future increases. It's not set in stone yet, and they've blended it over years so it goes up gradually each year. But I think right now our employer rates off the top of my head are in the 30–40% of every dollar we pay goes to PERS as the employer rate to fully fund our pension with PERS.
My recollection was that it was like $2 million a year to the city, and I think I saw a $1 million increase on that. I'm not sure, but the yearly cost at this point is approaching $3 million, $4 million.
The unfunded liability with PERS is probably going to be much larger. That $3 million amount may be the other post-employment benefits that's OPEB. That one only refers to retirement health insurance costs.
Right, but I'm trying to focus on the increase to the city from last year in terms of, because I know it was stated that it's going to jump to $4 million in a short amount of time per year.
That's the PERS pension.
That's
there is going to be some detail in the notes section in the back that will explain some of that, but that may be more helpful in what PERS does. I think the last one was as of June of 2017, but they do an actuarial report and they explain, because there's 4 different types of pensions that we have through here. We have miscellaneous, which is all the regular employees and the safety, and then through those there's 2 different types, the classic and then the newer ones that are new to the system since 2013 that are referred to as PEPRA. So each one of those has their own component in how they calculate those things. That's the main one that's going up.
Right. So as an accomplishment in the CAFR is the fact that we have joined a trust to address the unfunded liability, but that shouldn't be confused with the fact that our out-of-pocket expenses are increasing pretty significantly every year, regardless of addressing having the trust set up and a mechanism to fund, but we still have a obligation to pay as you go, and that's what I'm just trying to understand, like that.
And that goes up every year and has been. When PERS was originally established and available for cities to join on as public agency members, back in the 60s, they had to make a determination. Once they made that determination, it was assumed that if there was an 8% contribution from the employee, it was assumed that the employer was going to pay 8%. Then some employers, it went up based on who they hired, where those employees went later, and what their future benefit was. But what ended up happening is some ended up having that 8% drop down to 0, and they didn't have any funding at all. They were considered super funded. So what happened is when they were in that situation, nobody was looking at the long-term unfunded liability in the accounting profession. It hadn't even been addressed yet. Actuarials were looking at it, but it was never in your financial reports. So what they did was they decided they were going to increase their benefits. Both the state and local agencies did that many times when Gray Davis was the governor. They increased that cost. Then when their earnings, they said they were going to make, say, 7% per year on their investment earnings. When those investment earnings only made 4% per year, they were grossly under what those amounts would be. So if you're going to project over a 20-year period 7%, you should make 10% some years and 4% others. They had not even made that as a running average. So now they're having to drop those earnings estimates down, and those are causing costs for employers to go up because they were supposed to be figuring those out. So by us putting some aside in a future pension trust, if it ever gets to a point, I've been at some agencies where the employer rate's over 50%. And so when it gets too high, you can use some of that to defer it, or like the city did, it might have been back in the early 90s, they had basically passed a bond to pay down that debt. Some cities it has been a massive mistake, others have benefited. It's kind of out there, and the professional publications that I've read said there's a happy medium that you want to get with PERS carrying that burden, investing that money and making a certain average, and then sharing that with us, as opposed to us going out and incurring debt, at a lower amount. The ones that, the city of Stockton, their bankruptcy, they had done that same thing. They thought they were making a better deal by going out and taking a bunch of debt. Years down the road, when those PERS rates increased, they still had to keep making that debt. They couldn't afford to pay those benefits.
Okay, any other questions?
No, thank you.
I just want, so your goal and your strategy is to bring the unfunded liability down to zero by making the donations, wrong term, but the funding it each year? Or is that realistic? Because I've seen other cities that, I mean, we're not the only city. Many cities perhaps are in worse trouble than us, but what is our strategy?
There's probably two different strategies. One for the other post-employment that is the future health insurance, and then the other is for PERS. You can address that, but let's say that we had $3 million where we contributed and fully funded our OPEB trust and we had no unfunded liability. Then we would still have every year that what they call in that unfunded liability report is a pay-as-you-go. That's basically the amount that the city pays every year for former active employees that are now retiring and using the health insurance benefit the city's paying on. So those assets should be enough to pay those off for everybody even that's starting to work today and might not retire for 20 or 30 years down the road. When those monies are in there and earning, who's to say they may earn so much money that we end up having, rather than an unfunded liability, we have an unfunded surplus. So in future years, if that was to happen, councils could say, oh, we're going to spend that money down in order to do it. So there's kind of a balancing point that you want to get to, not to necessarily bring it down to zero, but make sure that in future years you don't have any large anomalies that cause massive expenditure towards it. And that's kind of what we're doing with the PERS side is being able to handle any future large increases in a year that we really didn't plan in a 1 or 2 year budget cycle, something kind of as a cushion to deal with that so we'll be able to get through some of those. But this is a major issue for, there's say 480 cities in the state. I'd say at least 400 of them, can't really handle big changes in those employer rates. So I think we're at 8 or 8.5%, and they were trying to move it down really fast. All those cities said, hey, we're not going to be able to afford the employer rate if they move too long. So they've moved it down, and now it's really going to be a matter of seeing what happens with some of their long-term investing performance that they do at PERS that's, kind of much more sophisticated than we would ever do with our own funds.
Councilmember Schnapps?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. So thanks for a very comprehensive report. It's hard to digest over 3 days.
It's not very exciting.
Oh. A couple of things I wanted to point out on page 2. You have the commissions and boards, and I know this probably reflects years prior to 2018, but we did away with our recreation and fine arts as well as advisory council on aging. So
yeah, I think right now formally I think all we have is a citizens advisory.
Yeah, so just
oversight's kind of a little different.
Yeah, so it's just something there to update. And then on page number 3, when we talk about investing options, I believe it might have been in 2018, but maybe it's because we haven't moved any money in there, but I thought that we had identified and approved to set aside money for investing with the Ventura County Investment Fund that they have there. And I can't remember what month we actually approved it in, but it was in 2018.
Yeah, I think it's just been, I think it was last summer that we approved using them as an investment source because we've been kind of a little overwhelmed with the vacancies that we have in the finance department. We haven't really moved any money technically over there. It's eventually going to happen. It's something that's, the LAIF fund is basically liquid within 24 to 48 hours. The Ventura County Fund, I think they've asked for, I think it's 5 days, or they had a little bit
It's a little
longer
longer.
window. So we're kind of going to ladder those two different sources for immediate needs.
But the upside to the local is that they earn a little bit more than the LAIF rate. So that was maybe one of the advantages, with a disadvantage maybe of not being so liquid quick. But certainly it's something to take a look at. So, just wanted to note, because we do have new council members up here, so just wanted to note that we have that option too.
With the interest environment that we have right now, we should start seeing a little bit of that going up, but it's also a weird economic time, because right now, if you had a 2-year treasury bill and you wanted to get a 5-year treasury bill, they're the same rate, which they call that an inverted curve, because usually the longer you hold money, the more you get back in return. So we're going to see some weird things moving around in interest rates too, and we're always, as the city, going to take the most conservative approach. So we might make less in interest income, but we won't lose any of the principal.
One of the other things on page 3, if I remember correctly, maybe 2 years or 3 years ago, we took a look at not having minimum amounts of like 6 months in general reserve, but maybe looking at 2, that would be a minimum, although I don't necessarily, I think we set that as a minimum, but maybe don't abide by it. Maybe set a higher threshold for the general fund reserves.
Yeah, I remember that. I think that was just before Mr. McDonald arrived. We took it from, for many years it had been 50% of expenditures was the target amount in the general fund reserves. We took it down to 25%, and that was approved. I think it was a split vote of the council. So right now we sit at 25% of, so if our general fund is $16 million, then we would have at least $4 million set aside in that reserve. We may want to reevaluate that at some point, especially now with the city's financial picture improving. There may be a desire on the council to take it back up. 50% was pretty high, although it was great that we were able to maintain that for a number of years. But maybe you want to go somewhere between 25 and 50 just to make sure that, especially in a community where we have the potential for flooding issues, some of the disaster-related expenses that could come to a coastal community, might be good to have a better, little bit higher reserve standard.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, you typically have a 50% reserve because in the, let's say 30 years ago, most cities, the majority revenue came from your property taxes, so you didn't even get your first property tax bill until December. And so a lot of times you'd have a 50% reserve, so your cash flows could take you through December. Now the State Board of Equalization has gotten a little bit better at getting sales tax distributed, so we don't have so much heavy revenue coming in at one point in time, so it's not as bad. But probably the best minimum reserve is 25%, and 50% just gives you a lot more flexibility if you have a major emergency or something maybe that is subject to being destroyed or out of commission.
Yeah, and then on page 12, up at the top, you say the city's assets exceeded liabilities by approximately $63.78 million. And I pointed that out to our city manager. I said, is that a typo in there? Could you walk us through what that is in brief?
Which was that on the financial?
On management's discussion and analysis, page 12, the first paragraph.
Oh.
Page 12 of what I'm looking at. I don't know if it's your page 12.
Yeah, where it says city's assets exceeded liabilities by $63.7 million. That's not, your assets are not just cash. That's going to be streets, roads, and buildings.
Thank you.
It should be larger. If you didn't have those, it would obviously be a lot lower. Or converse, if you had debt, that would be shrunken up even more too.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. I have a couple of questions. I was going to ask also about the reserve fund. I believe you had a slide that showed where we are on our reserve fund. So how does that measure up to our city's policy regarding the reserve funding goals of up to 6 months of general fund expenditures?
I think it's been, we've been really good at holding to those angles. If we continued, if we didn't have Measure U and we continued down the same path we probably would eventually expend all those reserves when you have these successive years of deficits. And that's, I mean, it's not something that you like to really publicly say, but that reserve level does give you that ability. So you could have, say, cannabis revenue just disappeared one year and it's now illegal and we can't sell it and nor get any money off of it. That $1 million a year, say we're living off of that budget, we would be able to use reserves for a couple years until we either figured out a new revenue source or we're able to cut back expenses to that level. If, you know, what happens is if you have to cut back in any level and you don't have any service or activity that you want to cut back, then you're kind of forced into it, as opposed to if you have some reserves, you can continue on that same level for a certain number of time, you know, months, years, or whatever, depending on what that amount is.
So to answer the question then, how many months of reserves would you say we have?
Well, just looking
Is there a way
at
to
the 17, 18,
Yeah.
we've got 16 million roughly in expenses and revenues, and our unassigned fund balance is 11 million. So
Yeah.
we're really over that.
Yeah, so we way exceed the 25%.
Okay.
You know, so even though the council set the minimum of 25%, staff, and really I would discourage anybody from saying, oh, hey, we didn't spend up all our reserves, let's go spend, you know, $4 million. It's, nobody's gonna ever hear me say that.
And then I had another question on one of the pie charts. Where does the cannabis and Measure U money show up? Is that under sales and use tax, or is it?
It is going to be sales, but we didn't do a pie chart with that. You're not going to see any of that. I think in the 2017-18 through last June, I'm thinking that
Where will it show up?
maybe 40,000 in revenue, so it wasn't very much. In your mid-year budget review, you should have seen it in there. The only discrepancy there is there was some cannabis revenue that wasn't paid based on sales, it was paid based on the application and the application process.
Okay, I was just wondering where we're going to find it, where to look for it when it does show up.
Yeah,
Is it going to be under sales and use tax, or is it, how are you going to consider it?
Oh, like the line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It might be under sales and, I don't
Well,
know where it would roll up in here, but it's not gonna be separately accounted for in the comprehensive annual financial report, because it's not large enough. Once it gets large enough, then they determine that because of certain materiality thresholds.
So they'll determine where on this pie chart it goes?
Yeah,
Okay.
and then when we get into the budget discussion, we'll have a separate line item in the budget. We already do actually for cannabis revenue.
Okay.
And when we do our pie charts for that, we'll show
Okay.
that separately, just so you can get a sense of how big it is. And
I've been trying to develop, and I want to be able to get back to the council, even if it's something that looks like the mid-year budget, some type of quarterly report to show budget to actual, where you can kind of see some of these things progressing. This accounting software system that we have has nothing canned, which should be a standard general report, and it's not in there, so we're having to develop it, and I want to make sure it looks right and it's kind of easy to understand. The worst case scenario may be expenses are positives and revenues are negatives because of the credit balance of revenues on there. But we're getting that. I'm hoping to bring that back to council so that when we're looking at budget, we'll be able to see more recent year-to-date actuals and kind of work off of some of that. That's where you'd see that line.
Okay, speaking of the accounting system, did the auditors have anything to say about our accounting system? I know that we got a clean bill of health here from the auditors, no findings at all.
Yeah, they're only going to really comment on our accounting software system if it was something of the Stone Ages and really nothing that anybody's currently using, because it will process, it will have internal controls, but some of the management reporting that makes it convenient, easy, and fast and efficient for us to look at some of this stuff, they're not really evaluating how efficient that system is or how good the management is.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Rollins, did you have something you wanted to add?
Is it realistic to have some form of a process that once our budget is approved and all the line items approved and all the revenue projections are approved, that the council is able to, or staff is able to identify things that were unexpected before they happen, so that we, that are not things that are unexpected that are emergencies that you have to spend no matter what, but things that because of change of ideas or philosophy, or, for example, items that we thought we were going to spend $100,000 and maybe we're not going to spend that, to know about it beforehand as opposed to after the fact. Or, in reverse, we have to spend $100,000 on something and we find out about it after it's already been spent. You feel kind of helpless in that process. And so is there a way, is it maybe pie in the sky, is there a way to kind of be informed when those things are coming up so that we can kind of educationally act on those things?
Yeah, we definitely, we hear the concern of the council, and there'll be some things that may, disaster strikes, things like that we don't have a whole lot of control over, that may be big expenditures that we can't warn the council about in advance. But we know that we need to do a better job than we have been doing of tracking the budget throughout the year and communicating the status of the budget, revenues and expenditures, to the council throughout the year. My direction to Ken has been on at least a quarterly basis. So once we get through the budget process and get a budget adopted by July 1st, then it's going to depend on when the final numbers for the first quarter come in. So July, August, September, maybe end of October, early November, we will have that first full quarter's worth of numbers in, and we would be coming to the council with a report on where we stand, revenues and expenditures. If there's some massive surprise that happens, either good or bad, we would come maybe more frequently than the quarterly report. But I want to get on at least, at the very minimum, a monthly report cycle to the council.
Okay. Thank you.
That would be good. Councilman Gama.
I just want to piggyback on what Mr. Rollins said. So when you presented the mid-year budget adjustment, it's a big, complicated piece of paper. And when we step away from here and look at it and analyze it, we could go down the lines and say, okay, public safety had a decrease in salaries of 20%. Parks and Recs had a decrease in capital by 100%. So I think what we would like is a summary of the major adjustments and an explanation to that. Because some of the items, I know in landscape, there was $150,000 removed from the landscape budget. Why? I still see weeds growing. I still see grass growing. So those are the type of things that I think Mr. Rollins and all of us need to know about. Like, hey, if there's a major movement of money, give us the justification for it so that it's just not buried in a big report. And so trying to break it down to its simplest form, and then makes us more educated and makes us better as we move forward through the budget process. I think it'll make us more involved and intelligently involved, I should say. So is that something that we could perhaps try and do next time?
Yeah, I think our plan was to try and present the budgets, both the financial stuff that I would kind of be in the lead of, and then with the department head that can explain how those financial numbers, turn into action. That's where I'm at a real disadvantage because I'm just reporting it. I don't really direct it. But I think that's realistic, and like I've said, I'm very disappointed with the accounting software system that's here. The city of Oxnard has the same one. They're dealing with it on an even worse basis. But it's basically, I've told anybody, it's like you're in a car race, and rather than having a nice, Formula One car, they've given you a 1940, Volvo or something like that you're supposed to go fast, and it's just really cumbersome to make this system work.
Okay, Councilman Rollins.
Just one thing. Are there accounting systems out there that would make you a Formula One?
Yeah, and finding those that aren't going to charge us, $10 million to get the system up and running, that's where it's going to be the trick. We're working on some things here. We want to get the budget passed, but really, personally, I want to get a contract signed for a software provider so that we can kind of start getting, because once we sign it, then they schedule you on for their conversion. So we may sign a contract today, and they would say, oh, the first available date we have is February of 2020. You know, so you're, and no, they won't, they'll tell you, well, we're scheduling about 6 months out, but, you know, they won't tell you until you get to that point, until you've inked it, and really it's going to be in front of council, because it's going to be large enough that you guys and the public will be seeing it before we have any commitment to them.
All right, any members of the public who'd like to address this issue? This report, okay, thank you, Mr. McDonald, thank you. All right, the recommendation is to receive and file, so let's do that. And the next item on the agenda is Public Works Quarterly Report.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council. Tonight, this is the Public Works update, and see, it's our quarterly update from January to March. This is the org chart for our Public Works Department. Public Works is responsible for solid waste, fleet, wastewater, water, PHWA, streets, landscape, and engineering and permitting. Facilities has been shifted over to the Housing Authority now with Gabriella. Oops. Yeah, okay. Okay. All right. With SB1 funds, we've purchased and installed 2 additional radar signs. In the past 2 years, we've added 6 radar signs for a total of 7. When I first got here 2 years ago, we only had 1 radar sign. And SB1, very fortunately, back in November, Proposition 6 was not repealed. So we have funds available because of that. This is a new radar sign that was installed. Oops. Can she operate it from there? Can you just operate it?
I think it's just this. It's the mouse.
All right, this was the radar sign that went up on Ventura Road south of Channel Islands Boulevard. This is the new radar sign on Patterson south of Hemlock Street, not far from the Mayor Pro Tem's residence.
Thank you very much for letting people know where I live.
South of where?
Miranda Park upgrades. This is what it looks like in the evening now. We have, we upgraded the LED lights, and they're much brighter. We've got a lot of positive feedback from the local residents. The Miranda Park parking lot gates, they are up, and we've partnered with PD. The police open them at 6 o'clock in the morning and close them at 10 o'clock at night. Thank you, Chief. And pothole repairs, we've been repairing potholes on North Ventura Road. Those are a couple of locations. That's another, we're repairing the potholes. We had heavy rains this year. We have aging infrastructure. I don't think that's any secret. Since May of 2018, we've had 18 waterline leaks, and this was a few months ago at Bolker Drive. This was in the Pacific Collection. Channel Islands Bridge repair. In February 2018, an impaired driver struck and did some severe damage to that bridge. It is under, we designed a repair, we went out to contract, and it's under construction. It's nearly complete. The cost for this is approximately $110,000. The gas tax fund is fronting it, and at this point, I'm not sure how much or when we may be getting some reimbursement from the impaired driver.
May I stop you for a sec, please? I have a lot of experience in claims management, and I'm wondering on the responsible party and our efforts to pursue subrogation to recover these costs, and can you give us an update on that?
Yeah, that is happening through the CJPIA. It's just unclear at this point how much we will actually get back, but they're pursuing it. So
it's a matter of insurance and possibly personal assets. I mean, does the driver have insurance? What's the status of it?
Yeah, the driver did have insurance, but there's some question as to the limits and whether it would cover an event of this size or an accident of this size. So we'll try to get as much as we can, but there's no guarantee at this point. We don't want to communicate that we're going to get it all back if that doesn't go well with the driver's insurance carrier.
Are we going to consider possibly suing this person's personal assets, or are we just going to take whatever insurance
I think that's
they
the
have?
next step. I mean, if it turns out that the subrogation process through the insurance company yields very little or nothing, we're going to have to look at going after the individual through a legal process.
Yeah, it just seems unfair that we have to use other monies to fix up something that was caused by an impaired insured driver.
It will be, we're waiting for a delivery of some of the heavy timbers to come in. We'll have this completed probably in about another 3 to 4 weeks. And it'll be, right now it's open. We have a K-rail there to protect, but we should finish in about 4 to 6 weeks at the outside. So that's going on. Okay, recreation corridor channel clearing. We had some heavy rains this year, which was really good. We needed that. We needed the water. We have reeds there, and that's always been an issue. We could not, in an emergency permit that I filed for, we cleaned the reeds by hand. We could not use heavy equipment. We utilized the probation crews and some of our staff, and we were able to clean the reeds, remove them, cut them down at the water level, and prevent severe flooding. There's another view. That was Joyce Drive. We did have some water back up there before I could declare an emergency and apply to Fish and Wildlife to get an emergency permit. And there you see the probation crew near Surfside cleaning the channel there also. We had our annual Christmas tree pickup in January, where we pick up the trees and chip them. Updating the engineering standards. When I got here, I found that our engineering standards hadn't been updated since 1996. So we're in the process of updating all our standards, and we hope to have this done by the end of the year. The Bolker Park ADA upgrades to the playground, they have been completed. Palm tree trimming. We've started palm tree trimming. They were long overdue. They hadn't been trimmed in over 5 years. We've been doing this with our own crews on some overtime. We hope to have it finished well before Memorial Day weekend. New bike path siding and striping. We have TDA funding for this. We've restriped sections of the bike path, put up new signs, painted the logo there, the international logo. It's ongoing. We have a deadline of June 30th to get this work done and expend those special funds. Citywide pavement maintenance plan. We have begun working on the citywide pavement maintenance plan. We've begun crack filling on northbound Ventura Road, and we'll slurry seal it later in the year. We're doing asphalt repair in Hueneme Bay, where tree roots have uplifted the roadway. That's in preparation for crack filling and slurry sealing in there eventually. Crack filling in the Bolker neighborhood is going to be going on, and then other locations are going to be following after that. There's a picture of the crack filling. We rented a crack filling machine, and our street crew did the crack filling. That's just by Wendy's, not far from City Hall. There's another photograph. This is a couple of photographs of some of the asphalt repair in Hueneme Bay where we've had some tree roots uplifting the pavement. We're going to be doing some more of that in the next couple of months, some with our crews and partially I'm going to contract out. Coming soon, Civic Center accessibility upgrades. Currently, from the parking stalls to the entrance of City Hall, we are not in compliance with ADA requirements, Americans with Disabilities Act. We've had the area surveyed. It's under design. Next week, I'll be meeting with the city manager and some other staff to review the preliminary design on that.
Is this from the, from one of the reports that we worked with the CJPIA in terms of the assessment for our buildings? Is this one of the projects?
Yeah, we've known for quite a while that we have some major work to do at City Hall, really all of our facilities, but we're going to start with City Hall inside and outside, and you have the JPIA. We made a decision because of Don's background not to use their consultant because there was quite a cost involved in that, but they've definitely been supportive of us, and we've been able to use them as a resource to get this finally off the ground.
So that's one of the things that'll be upcoming. Excuse me. Water rate workshop coming in May. I believe the council is aware that on May 15th, we'll be having a special workshop. That's on a Wednesday afternoon. Implementation of the phase 1 of the Water Master Plan. I can say we're moving forward with that. We have a almost 80-year-old cast iron pipe main in Ventura Road. And one of the things that was identified in the Water Master Plan was replacing this. Digging up Ventura Road would be a nightmare. I was not looking forward to the logistics of that. I reviewed the Water Master Plan and tried to come up with an alternative. We have a PHWA asset, a line that was put in 1996 that runs west on Pleasant Valley Road. It crosses the Navy base. What I proposed, and I've got some conceptual buy-off from the Navy, the Channel Islands Beach District, and the County of Ventura, is to tap into it on the west side of the base, run a new line north on the east side of Victoria, and then tie into our loop near Channel Islands and Victoria. The Water Master Plan identified that we have a fire flow deficiency at the north side. By putting in this new line and tapping into that line that crosses the base, we would solve the fire flow issue at the north side. It's a win-win for the Navy because the Navy has pressure issues at that northwest end of the base, so it would be a win-win for them. And also, it would significantly minimize any work I have to do in Ventura Road with respect to this 80-year-old line. This would be a backup so that if that line has a break, we can still get water to the north side through there. There still will be some work that'll be done, needed to be done along Ventura Road. But if this goes through, it will significantly eliminate some of that work. And just because of the logistics of that, I estimate it'll be a savings to the Water Enterprise Fund of somewhere between $1 million to $2 million. So what we've done is I've requested a proposal from a design consultant to do a capacity study on that line. And I'm looking at some preliminary numbers myself. I'm 80% confident that we'll be able to do this. So that's the good news. We are underway with this. It's been languishing for a long time. The Water Master Plan was done over 11 years ago. All right, pavement, permanent removal of the reeds in the creek. There's only a small window that I can do this. It's in September. Fish and Wildlife is very tough to get a permit. I have to have a biologist on full time for this, but we are pursuing this, and we will probably be able to use, if I'm granted the permit, heavy equipment to actually remove the reeds, because all I was able to do was use hand crews and cut them to the water line. So what I'm looking for is permission under the observation of a biologist to remove the roots. So hopefully that we'll be able to do that. That's what we're looking to do in September. 2 additional radar signs. Besides the 6 we've already have up, we're looking for 2 more locations that'll be going up. And again, that's with SB1 funds. Illuminated street sign replacement. Oops. We have some old signs up there that have lights in them, and you may have noticed with the high winds, a number of them came down, and they hadn't been well maintained. There's a lot of corrosion on them. I've seen them. The couplings have been torn. What we're going to do, and again, this is with SB1 funds, we're going to use a highly reflective blade sign and replace these. These will not be lit, but they're of high enough reflective quality where you do not need them to be lit. So it's actually an energy savings. So that's one of the things that will be upcoming. Accessible pedestrian signals, APS. Again, thanks to the fact that the voters did not repeal SB1, we have the funds to help out some of the people that have some hearing impairment. These are common in the city of Carpinteria, city of Santa Barbara, and also in Ventura. Back in September, I had a request from a citizen about asking for one of these near Patterson and Channel Islands Boulevard. And I said, well, that's on my to-do list if we have funding available. Well, I'm very thankful that we will have funding available, and that'll be upcoming, and that'll be one of the first locations to get this type of crossing. And traffic calming measures. Again, this has been, since I came here, people have been talking about problems in residential neighborhoods with traffic speed. Well, we're going to start our traffic calming measures, which will be speed cushions, speed humps. The difference between a speed bump, as you see on the right side, you find those in parking lots. They're very abrupt and they're going to rattle your teeth. Then you have a speed hump, which is a smoother transition. And those go typically across the street. However, the city of Ventura and the county of Ventura, they use speed cushions. The reason they use speed cushions, these are about 4x4, is because fire trucks can straddle these, because you don't want a very expensive $200,000, $300,000 fire truck running down the street at a high speed and hitting one of these things. They can straddle it. Regular passenger cars cannot. So that is what we're going to be looking at, is speed cushions in the neighborhood. I'll be doing a community outreach. I know some of the areas that want this. I know I'll have people after this meeting probably emailing in requesting that. We're going to be looking at the locations in different neighborhoods, and these will only be going in residential. We can't put them on the arterials. That's not where you put them. But we will do an outreach. We will identify potential locations for speed cushions, speed humps, and then I'll do a community outreach, a neighborhood outreach, because you want to have community buy-in on that street for the placement of that, because sometimes it will block some of the flow of water, and you also have a noise issue at night if somebody's going over. Also, street sweeping. So I want to make sure that we have community buy-in from the neighborhoods, that they know some of the potential, if you want to say downsides, for having a speed cushion put in. So this is what we did at the city of Ventura. We would typically want to have 60% buy-in on a residential street before we put in a speed cushion. So that's what we're going to do, something similar here. So that's going to be upcoming. And this Wednesday, I'm meeting with a traffic engineer because I'm going to need some contract help to work on this.
Mr. Belvahana, we have a question.
So for these, this is great. And so when you're saying not arterial, but in residential areas, so it could possibly then be, for example, like right around Mar Vista, possibly on that back street back there that people may be speeding around the corner. And then it could also be over on Surfside because of the racers?
No, not on Surfside.
Not on Surfside.
Surfside's too wide of a street to have that. Okay. And that would be considered, because of the width, it would be considered an arterial.
Okay, all right. Okay.
It would be on a street like Clara, Scott, Joyce. One of those streets would be a candidate for this type of thing.
Okay, all right, very good, thanks.
Beach park amenities, the council awarded these. We're going to be getting new urinals for the men's restroom, cameras, of course, a concrete picnic pad, lighting upgrades very similar to what we did at Miranda Park, and a beach shower down there.
Yes, the surfers are very happy about that.
Okay. And then we have current vacancies. Primarily, most importantly, the Deputy Director of Public Works, the old Steve Hickox position, Construction Inspector, Fleet Mechanic, Wastewater Operator, Water Utility Operator, Landscape Maintenance Worker 2 and 1, Landscape Laborer, 2 positions in solid waste, and those are solid waste. There are trash truck drivers, a Water Resources Inspector, and now a Street Maintenance Worker. So hopefully we're going to be able to move forward on this now, and I'm optimistic with some recent changes that we will be able to do this. And our friendly city by the sea with a nice rainbow.
Very nice.
So are there any
And a
questions?
Any questions from council?
The various different positions that haven't been filled yet, are those budgeted positions?
Oh, yes, those are budgeted positions that we've been, struggling to work without. We've been juggling a lot of things, but I'm very proud of my staff. The staff has done a great job. I've got a great team, and what we accomplish is because of the team effort.
Yeah, I was going to say you've done a very admirable job considering all of those key positions not being filled that were budgeted.
I have to say that I agree, because our streets are much nicer than some of the other streets. And adjoining cities, especially after the rain and everything that happens then with the streets and potholes and things like that. I really appreciate our team being, going above and beyond and making this a very nice city, but also something safe.
Thank you.
You spoke about the tree root problems down at Hueneme Bay, and there's a reoccurring question to me out in the community is, particularly from homeowner associations, is how come we can't get rid of trees? And I've asked and spoke and trying to understand what is the policy from the city, and my current understanding is that you could remove a tree as long as you replace it. Okay, so is that our policy?
I have to double check. I don't know the policy right off the top of my head. I'd have to get back to you on that.
Okay, and then the second tree comment I have is, when you go and you're repairing sidewalk that's been lifting up, shouldn't we consider removing the tree? Because oftentimes these trees are 30, 40 years old and are causing a lot of damage. So if that is our policy, remove a tree, replace a tree, shouldn't we execute that? That's something I would hope that we could clarify, because it's not clear. My homeowners association believes that they can't remove a tree, and I said, no, you can remove a tree as long as you replace it, but they're scared to do anything. So the city removed a tree here in front of City Hall and replaced it, albeit in a different location. That's another discussion. So I just think we need to be clear on our tree policy, because there's a lot of big coral trees that are causing a lot of damage right in front of my house. And so to me, it just seems a little backwards to pull up the concrete, replace it, and then you're going to have to come back in 5 or 6 years when the roots lift it up. And then one other thing, if you could look into it for me, a number of us spend a lot of time at the museum volunteering and helping out down there, and much appreciated that crosswalk. It's great, and so many people walk, they hit the button, the truck could see it almost all the way down to Ventura Road. So they know to slow down, there's pedestrians in the crosswalk. However, if you're crossing Hueneme Road on Market Street, the intersection is literally 20 feet behind the corner. So if you obey the law and stop your car behind the white line, you can't see what's coming. So she's shaking her head, she knows what I'm talking about. So can we take a look at that and perhaps move the intersection up to the point where you could actually see the oncoming traffic? Because so many times at the museum, you see a car inch and all of a sudden they have to really stop because here comes a truck barreling through. I think that's something that could help enhance safety there. So I just wanted to make you aware of that.
we can take a look at the geometrics of that intersection, and I can get back to the city manager on that. Probably is not going to be an overnight, review, but I can commit to taking a look at that and then getting back at some future date, and I can make a presentation after I talk to the city manager. And getting back to the tree issue, what I'm going to do is I want to confer with Tony Stewart and make sure I've seen what community development has as far as tree issues. And we just had our city arborist, our longtime city arborist, Graham Jensen, retire in December, and we have not been able to fill his position because he would, when we were replacing things on the sidewalk, I would have him take a look at it and give me his opinion as, do you think this tree is worth saving? Should I put, can I cut the roots and put a root barrier there? I'd ask for his professional opinion as to what the best means to minimize this happening again. And right now, I do not have an arborist to work with on that. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get this position filled also. But yes, when we replace a section of sidewalk, we typically will cut the roots. We have to look at the tree because you have to have a balanced canopy. You can't cut one side. If you cut a root on one side, you're going to have to trim the canopy and it depends on what size root that was that you were cutting. And we can use a root barrier on there too. So those are the things we do look at, but I'm not an arborist and I deferred situations like this to him, but that's one of the things that we do need to fill.
But I would hope that the same, and again, we're policymakers here, so perhaps maybe this is a good project for us to take a look at our tree management program and decide whether or not we need a new policy, because I'm kind of unclear on it. You remove this coral tree out front here for obvious reasons, and then I look at the one back here in the corner and I'm thinking, well, why is this thing still here? If that one needed to go, then perhaps this one needs to go. Then I look at the one in my cul-de-sac and the concrete is broken into 20, 30 different pieces, right there in the cul-de-sac from the coral tree. And, I'm just wondering, do we need to create a better policy? Because I just think it's costing us in the long run more than it should. And then one other point, and I'll be quiet. At the museum, those ficus trees are raising the concrete that it's new concrete relatively. It was put in there as a result of a claim, and it's risen 3, 4, maybe 5 inches now at this point, and we actually took it upon ourselves to put little cones there to kind of be a warning to people walking by and running by. So again, these are trees that are probably 40, 50 years old, and it's just aching to be a problem. And sorry for taking up all your time.
No, we'll take a look at that location. We're trying to be as proactive as possible. We still have a staffing shortage. In an ideal situation, I'd like to have a very proactive sidewalk replacement program, and I just haven't been able to yet get that. That is on my to-do list. We'll take a look at those ficus trees out by the museum. I can come back. I want to research and make sure that I speak well and knowledgeable on our tree ordinance and our tree policy, and I can come back and report to the city manager, and we can make a presentation later. Our arborist did, at my request before he left, because we knew he was leaving, he did do a partial survey of some of the coral trees in the city and evaluate them, because we were concerned about that. But again, that would be one of the things that I'd have a new arborist, and we're looking at contracting out. We're looking at all types of options here, but it's really extremely beneficial to have an in-house arborist, and I'm hopeful that we can replace him and bring somebody back on board.
All right, any other comments?
Just one.
Yeah, just for the record, with what Councilmember Gamma has asked, I know that we took it here. We took up the issue of this coral tree outside in front here and what we had to do, and it was, regarding the drought that we had and the disease that it had. And so that issue did come to the city council for what we were going to do with it, so just FYI.
I guess once you're able to confirm what the existing policy is on trees, in other circumstances that have been involved in whether or not the tree is diseased, or it may be healthy but just inappropriate for the location. I know that in other cities, many of the trees that have been put in 50 years ago developed quick canopies, but they also did a number on the sidewalks. And I guess the new philosophy is there's a number of street-type trees where the roots are less invasive and cause less problems. And hopefully when the new arborist comes on, and also the existing policy that you have, maybe we need to tweak it. For example, if, I don't know, we don't know what the policy is, like you replace it with a new tree, but you don't want to replace it with another ficus tree if in fact that's a problem.
Right. Some of the problem, though, in Hueneme Bay, for example, we had trees, and because of the drought, we had cut back on watering, or everybody had cut back on watering. So the trees are looking for a source of water, and that source of water is in the base underneath the streets. So they were, rather than going deep because there was no water, they would go laterally. And that has been part of the problem with the pine trees that you see on Bay Boulevard. And that's one of the areas that I'm going to be contracting out for asphalt removal and cutting of those roots in the next several months.
But I think you just keyed in on what we're trying to establish here, is that should we not look at removing the tree that's causing the problem? And what is our current policy? And it sounds like our policy is to cut the roots out.
Well, I want to be clear when I come back and speak. So I just want to double check what our policy is. I want to double check with Tony Stewart as far as our development standards. And then I'll be able to come back to the city manager and we can make a presentation to the council to clarify that.
Okay. All right. Any comments from the audience? All right. Mr. Villafana, thank you so much for your presentation and all the good work that your staff is doing. I think you're being very proactive considering the limited resources that you have to work with, but your cost-saving measures are very much appreciated, and thank you, and again, and your staff for all their hard work.
Thank you.
Great projects you have going. Thank you. Okay, recommendations to receive and file this report. And let's then move on to item number 12, Police Department. Chief Salinas, please, who will present our monthly crime and community activities update.
Don's really stepping up his PowerPoint game.
Yeah, very nice.
Step mine up.
But he needs a video.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to
put the pressure on you.
Exactly. Yeah. I did. Mayor Pro Tem, council member, city staff. So I'm here this evening to present my March crime and community update. This will have the stats for March along with other events that we've participated in throughout the month of March. I'll start with our crime update, as I do every month. For the month of March, we only had 2 violent crimes in the entire month. They were both aggravated assaults, which, as you can see, there's lots of zeros up there. We didn't have any homicide, we didn't have any rapes, we didn't have any robberies, we didn't have any motor vehicle thefts, which is unusual because in the month of February, we had the most that we've ever had since I've been here, and it jumped all the way down to 0, and no arsons. So we had a total of 38 total crimes. The 2 aggravated assaults, one was involving an individual who found his stolen property on the app Let It Go, and rather than call the police, he set up a meet with the suspects to get his property back. And as you can imagine, that went sideways. The victim ended up pistol whipping, the suspect ended up pistol whipping the victim, and so that's why it says it involves a gun, but nobody was shot. And then we had a brandishing in the 600 block of Hemlock in a private residence involving 2 known parties that were involved in a relationship. So really both these incidents could have been avoided and we would have had zeros across the board. But there's been a lot of talk on social media about the shootings and stabbing in Port Hueneme. And no, other than the event that occurred in February involving the occupied vehicle with the father and his 6-year-old son, those are really the only events. We have had a shooting into a residence, but that's not a UCR reportable crime because the building can't be the victim. And so it's the crime of just shooting into an unoccupied or occupied dwelling is not a reportable crime per the FBI. Well, we take the report, it's just not reportable under these statistics. So again, larceny is what drives our crime rate here in the city of Port Hueneme. 15 theft from vehicles, 4 shoplifts, 4 theft from buildings. And I'd mentioned before in a previous, when your motor vehicle theft rate goes down, so do the theft of license plates. When your motor vehicle thefts go up, your theft of license plates go up. So as a result of having 0 vehicle thefts, we didn't have any theft of license plates. So as we compare this to 2018, it's a 48% reduction in violent crime as compared to the previous year, 8% increase in property crime, and a total overall 1% increase in crime as compared to last year. But again, I always point to violent crime in our city and as a key indicator of how we're doing, because the larcenies and thefts are quite frankly preventable for the most part. We had our educational cannabis forum on March 28th at the community center. It was well attended by 125 people as well as all city council, and we had approximately 35 to 40 cannabis employees at this event. The forum was kicked off with Lori Ajax, who is the chief of the Bureau of Cannabis Control. She came down to our city. I gave her a tour of 4 of our dispensaries. She was quite impressed. She took a lot back with her and she gave opening comments. These were the 7 dispensaries that were represented at the Cannabis Forum. The reason for that is I wanted everyone to see who was operating these dispensaries and meet the owners behind the scenes. Thought that was important as well. And they all showed up and they all had tables.
We've shared with Z that we think his logo is very creepy with that octopus in its eyes. So we don't know if he'll change his logo or not, but it gives some of us nightmares when you look at it.
Oh, really? It
Yeah.
gives you nightmares? Oh, sorry.
Exactly.
So here are some pictures from that event that evening. Again, the community center was, I would say, packed. All 7 dispensaries were there, and we provided free dinner to everyone, and we also had everyone sign up for our new Ring app and to be part of our Port Hueneme network. Something that we also do is we engage in the community. That's one of my priorities here, and so this past month, one of the local Inspired Charter Schools came and visited our department. We give about 10 of these tours a year. And here's Sergeant Eric Starna and several of the pictures showing that tour of the facility. I mentioned before our paper shredding event. I wanted to remind everyone it's on May 4th, Saturday. This is a picture from last year. We did very, very well, and we hope to do manage the same amount of recycling this year as we did last year. So we were going to try and add an e-recycling event, but I've been working with Public Works, and we're going to schedule that here in the coming months or so people can come and recycle their electronic components as well. We tried to get it in on this event, but we just didn't have enough time. So Hueneme Bay is our largest senior community, so we decided to take the police department to them, and we had an event this past weekend where we allowed them to dispose of all of their pharmaceuticals, do their paper shredding, and we also got them signed up for our Ring app. So as you can see, we collected 60 pounds of prescription medication, 1,200 pounds of paper was shredded, and we registered 26 people onto our new Ring network, which we then raffled off a device. And Claire Emerson there on the top right, she was the winner of our new Ring device, so she now has one of these at her home and hopefully working right now. I wanted to show everyone our new employees of the year. I say 2018. Some people would argue, well, it's 2019, but they're being recognized for their accomplishments in 2018, so that's how I have it listed up there. Eric Starna is our police sergeant, who's our supervisor of the year. Officer Chris Taylor is the officer of the year. Dispatcher Jerry Harbin is the dispatcher of the year, and Explorer Robert Lopez is our police explorer of the year. Robert is being recognized this Thursday, where the city of Port Hueneme is hosting the county event for Explorer of the Year, which all the agencies from the county come here, and we'll be having that event at the Ocean View Pavilion. Jerry was recognized last Thursday at the...
What time will that be?
6 o'clock. 6 o'clock. Dispatcher Jerry Harbin was recognized at the Cameron Airport with all the other county agencies this past Thursday for her accomplishments. Officer Chris Taylor was recognized at the Bard Mansion at the Hueneme Chamber of Commerce event, and Sergeant Eric Starner will be recognized at a Knights of Columbus event in the month of June. I think most everyone attended the Wheelhouse Plaza Street Fair. It was well attended. I was there most of the day, and I guess that we had approximately 2,500 people show up throughout the day. One of our missions was to buy that van you had in there and fundraise enough money. Our goal was $25,000. We got to $20,000 on that day, so we're just a few dollars short, but we hopefully will be driving that brand new van here back to the station here in the next couple of months. So I would say it was a complete success, the event as well as our fundraising goal. And if many of you saw, the line to get into his dispensary was about 4 hours long, and people were waiting quite a long time to get in there. We deployed our new Ring network. As I explained at our last meeting, we've had several events, which included Hueneme Bay, the Chamber of Commerce food truck event, the Cannabis Educational Forum, as well as the Wheelhouse Plaza. So we've registered over 100 people so far that have now been added to the network. And so as I promised, we were going to raffle off some Ring devices at City Council meeting with anybody who jumped on our Facebook and showed that they downloaded the app and were now users of Neighborhoods by Ring. So with that, I have a list in front of me, and the people that signed up on Facebook are listed between numbers 63 and 98. So if Mayor Pro Tem Lopez, if you could pick a number between 63 and 98.
73.
I love that year.
Did they have to be present to win?
No, they do not. They're going to get a nice message from me on Facebook.
Yes, he said Lopez.
Oh,
that's okay.
Why did I say? Oh, because of the Explorer Lopez. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Councilmember Sylvia Schnapps. Schnapp. Munoz Schnapp. I'm sorry. Can you please pick a number between 63 and 98?
Between 63 and 98, 80.
80, okay. Councilmember Gama?
Do you know, oh, I get to pick a number?
Sure, between 63 and 80. I have 3 I'm going to raffle off.
We'll go with 66.
So we have Kelly Blanco, Gina Estrada, and Shannon Began were the 3 recipients of our Ring devices.
Oh, congratulations if you're out there.
I'll notify them this evening. Moving on. So that concludes my presentation. Again, we're on all of these social media platforms, and if the council has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the council?
So I understand the succession. People register for Ring and then they purchase it, or how does that work?
So there's a total separate network called Neighbors by Ring. You don't actually have to own a Ring device to be on that. It's like a Facebook platform with a feed, and everybody, whenever they note something suspicious that they capture on their Ring doorbell, they upload it. It also, so you can be well informed in your neighborhood. Now, if you own a Ring device, it's even better because you get to upload your videos and share them with your neighbors and share them with the police, most importantly. We have access to the network, and anytime a Ring device holder can send us a video showing us some suspicious activity or someone has stolen a package from their porch or stolen something from their vehicle. So it's worked very well. We've identified at least 3 different cases where the Ring device video allowed us to identify the suspects. So it's working.
I had one of your officers download it for me or upload it for me on my phone while I was at the festival, and I love it. It's really nice to be able to actually see what Ring is capturing, and I don't own the Ring system, not yet, but I hope to. You can actually see the video and you see what's going on, and it's another tool for communicating among neighborhoods about what's going on. So
yes, so more oftentimes than none, whenever we have like the incident involving the shooting and the occupied vehicle, the officers know there's going to be Ring devices in the neighborhood, and we're able to generally capture the vehicle leaving the area or capture the suspects in the neighborhood as a result of these devices. So the mission is to create this giant network in the city where we can pretty much capture just about anything happening in your neighborhood.
Yeah. Councilwoman Shops.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Chief, for doing an excellent job. You and your team really get the information out there and are very active in the community. Your outreach is outstanding, so thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Gama.
Yes, I just want to make the comment that the police need help, always need help. And so if you're out there, you see something, take the time to report it, get a hold of our police. And when you do that, it really does help. And I know it's a hassle, but if you see something, looks suspicious, call the police and help them help us. Thank you very much for everything you've done.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anybody want to come up and, okay, do you want to come on up?
Yes.
How do I go about getting, I've been skunked out of my own house. They're invading my property. The neighbors next door are heavy pot smokers.
Oh.
It comes to my garage, kitchen, and living room.
All you need to do is call us because this smell is disturbing your peace, and we can make contact with those residents to do something about that.
That is no way. I mean, they're
Okay.
heavy smokers.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Anything else?
Oh, and on that note, the Historical Museum has invited me to go speak and do a cannabis update. So during the month of September, I'll be going out to give another update, and it'll be updated from my previous presentation so we can really get a look into how cannabis is faring in the city of Port Hueneme.
I wonder how many other requests you're getting from the other cities to go out and talk to them about what our experience has been here.
I've had 25 requests for the presentation, and I'm on calendar for 3 additional presentations to organizations.
High demand. That's great. Thank you for representing us.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a hand in the audience. Might be for you, Chief.
That's why she has to come up.
They have particular devices.
They can answer questions afterwards.
Okay.
Maybe you can suggest that. They're going to continue. You got to tell them.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. If anybody has questions for Chief Salinas, just go over and see him. The public who's watching cannot hear the questions coming from the audience unless you come up to the podium. So just trying to keep everybody informed. Thank you. All right, let's move on then to, if there's no other comments on item 12, we'll move on to item 13 from the city manager, establishing a human resources job classification and salary schedule.
Great, thank you, Mayor and Council. Last item of the night, but an important one. We're going to have Interim Deputy City Manager Joe Tanner start off and give you some basics on the report. Then I'll be making some closing remarks, and we'll make conclude with our recommendation.
Thank you very much. So to be clear, this is a new position that we're recommending. It is not budgeted. Pending council approval, we will include it in the budget starting July 1st. So matter of recruitment, we probably won't have someone in there by then anyway. So this is the New position, as you know, that the Human Resources Division is in a period of transition right now, with myself being interim, and then we have a part-time admin services coordinator and a part-time risk manager, and then the rest of the duties are being handled by Regional Government Services, known as RGS. And so they're covering a lot of hours, a lot of demand right now in human resources. As you saw from the Public Works Director, a lot of vacant positions trying to be covered. Staff has identified a number of areas of improvement in human resources. I personally feel, human resources is kind of one of the foundations of any organizations. But some of the troubles that we've identified is just the sheer number of vacancies, the turnover rate, documentation on hiring has been somewhat lax. Employee evaluations are being inconsistently applied. There's been very little organizational development and citywide training, so like leadership training or customer service training, been very little of that. Personnel rules is outdated and needs to be looked at. Not fully making use of our NeoGov, which is our governmentjobs.com software application for recruitment. Just overall records management has been a little suspect. We don't have a wellness program, and as you know, we've had a number of issues in the area of risk management as far as updating policies and safety trainings and things like that. This position would be a mid-management confidential employee. They would be required to have a bachelor's degree and some working experience in the human resources field. The pay scale, the pay range is between $89,000 and $115,000, and about $45,000 for benefits, depending on number of dependents they have and things of that nature. Right now, so RGS, as I mentioned, is covering some of the kind of day-to-day activities that a human resource manager would be covering. We also have a vacant human resources analyst that they are also covering. And any given month, RGS has been charging the city about $29,000, $30,000 a month. If you compare that to a human resource manager and an analyst, once they're there full time, they'll be able to take on all those duties. The combined total of those two positions is about $22,000 a month. So anywhere between $6,000, $8,000 a month we'd be saving with this position. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Tanner?
$25,000 for recruitment?
Yeah, if we wanted to go out and hire one of the well-known recruiting firms, that's about the going rate. I've gotten quotes back from 3 different recruitment firms, the highest being $27,000, the lowest being about $21,000.
What about governmentjobs.com and Indeed and Next or whatever? There's a number. I just don't understand why we have to spend $25,000 to recruit for a human resource manager.
It's any recruitment, even just for a facilities maintenance person, would run anywhere between $3,000 and $8,000, just depending on.
That's a lot less than 25.
That's true. That is true. So you're going to have those costs already on top of there. So basically, those that $20,000, $25,000 that we would be paying the recruiter, we're just not paying RGS to do that work. That's how I kind of would look at it. So that work, that leg work for that position to post the job, do the background on the candidates, do initial interviews, all that work would be handled by RGS anyway, who we're paying by the hour. So really it's just you're paying one versus the other. And
okay, Councilman Rollins?
With the type of person that you're looking for, I just kind of heard over that they're looking for somebody with some HR experience. It would seem that, the person that you want would need to have a whole lot to kind of fulfill all the different discrepancies that we're trying to meet right now. Is when you've established this position and the salary range, are we going to be able to find somebody that's going to be able to fill these gaps proficiently?
I think so. When we looked at the salary schedule, we did compare it to some of the other neighboring cities, and it is competitive. It's not the highest, it's not the lowest, but it's within that range. So I think we could find someone who's good, and maybe just from what I've seen in my short time here, as the folks that are applying to some of these jobs, maybe 5 years ago it probably would have been a stretch, but because of the climate that we're in right now with less than 4% unemployment rate and our location in Ventura County, it makes it for people in LA County or other areas of the state to apply and then move here. So I think that the combination of the salary and the benefits, we can find someone good. And if they're lacking in one area or the other, I think we could train them up so they can. It's really about being the type of person that we need, who's very organized and diligent.
Yeah, I would just say between the high level of professionalism now that HR people need to have on all these different things, and to protect us from potential litigation because we're not evaluating them properly, we didn't hire them properly. I would tend to think, as you were mentioning earlier, that we want to have somebody that is fairly well experienced in these areas and not just some experience.
Yeah, the minimum requirement is 3 years on the job description as it's written. So, that's just to get your foot in the door and get an interview. That's not we're not going to stop someone who has 10 years experience in HR. I mean, they're certainly more than welcome.
Okay. Well, I think it's very important that we get a good HR manager, and I think the costs involved will pay for themselves if we get somebody in here who can address all these issues that we're having. So, did you have something else?
One more comment. So this is in addition to the prior position we just agreed to, and I kind of feel like we haven't even started our first step in the budget, and here we are adding positions. I mean, are we kind of getting ahead of ourselves?
That was a good question that Mr. Rollins asked me last week. Keep in mind that the two community services officers positions are not being filled until we get into the next budget year. And there'll be a whole set of new funding sources coming in on July 1st that will apply to those jobs. That was just approving the job description tonight. This one is a net new position that we are asking for authorization to go ahead and include in the budget and fund. And the question is, as I explained it to Councilmember Rollins, if you're a budget hawk or you're a fiscal conservative, even though it seems counterintuitive because I'm asking you to approve a new position, you're actually going to be saving money over what we're spending now, because you're looking at $30,000 a month roughly for the contracted firm versus a total of $22,000 a month for the structure that we're recommending, which is the new human resources manager position, the existing vacant human resources analyst position, and then there's a part-time, I think she's called administrative coordinator, but all of her time is focused on HR. So we are adding a net new position, but even when you total all those out, it's going to be significantly less per month than what we're spending the contracted with the contracted firm. And we have an in-house department that I think we're going to get a higher level of service from than we're getting from the contracted firm. So, your point is fair that we need to be careful about piecemealing things and all of a sudden we've approved 15 new positions. But in this particular case, the sooner we can get this off the ground, the sooner we can start realizing that savings and really rebuilding an in-house human resources function, maybe even the best that we've ever had in terms of the resources that we're making available to HR. We've asked our past HR staff and division to do an awful lot with 1 or 2 people, or maybe 1.5 people. We're moving up now to 2.5 full-time, and we're, the hope is that with that, we're going to get a higher level of service for the whole organization than we've had in the past.
Councilwoman Schnapps.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Tanner. Would it be safe to say that some of the budget amounts that you've talked about here in terms of, what this position would cost us, do we get to reap any benefits from, like, say, the enterprise funds that get to pay portions of this salary so that we would not have 100% hit the general fund for this?
Yes, so in the allocation plan, there's a whole formula mixed in about how much gets transferred back into the general fund, so it wouldn't be all general fund. This position wouldn't be all general funded. It would have its proportion of the water enterprise funds.
Would it be somewhere around a 10–15%, possibly?
Probably more than that to the enterprise funds. Yeah, and it's perfectly legitimate because this person will serve the whole city organization, and water, wastewater, solid waste are significant parts of the overall budget. Housing authority as well. So yeah, that a portion of the position could be charged to either through an overhead allocation process or direct charged to those non-general fund sources, and there's nothing inappropriate about that at all because the person is really providing services to all those different units.
Right, okay. So just something to note. And I just want to commend for everybody who had served us in HR and been a deputy city manager, and that's been the last couple of positions. For a number of years, we've had, a person wear multiple hats, and so it sounds like this is the time to break it and just say, we really do need an HR dedicated manager along with his or her staff to handle our size organization and then some, everything that comes with it, from evaluations to risk management, everything. So I think it's worthy enough that we have to really take a look at, especially in today's day and age and what we're facing.
That's great. Yeah, if we were a real small organization, 25, 30, 40 employees, mostly contracted services, you could make the case that having a contracted out HR division or department would make sense and might be less expensive. But at our size, 115 employees, probably growing a little bit over the next few years with Measure U, cannabis, some of the other resources that are coming in now on the revenue side, I can't buy the argument that we should have a contracted out HR department. And I think the numbers are proving that we can do it in-house for less than we're paying the contracted firm and get more personalized service if we give them the staffing structure that will work. And that's why we want to do the manager, the analyst, and keep that part-time position in place as well.
All right. Okay.
I was going to say, as part of the rates that we pay to JPIA, would this perhaps lower them because now we're at more proficient level of preventing possible litigation because we have a full staff a larger staff, more competent staff to kind of be able to deal with that? I don't know, but it's just brainstorming a little bit.
Yeah, it could in the long run. Those rates are driven on the actual experience of claims and on the workers' comp side, injuries. So it's going to be a while before that would kick in. But I know they will definitely be supportive of anything that we can do to create a more professional and better resourced HR division.
And I also, if I could just add to that, I think that having an HR manager, the person who takes that position will be able to take advantage of the JPIA more, and as far as being involved with them and what they're looking for, and providing all the trainings and scheduling and so on and so forth. So really, it's it may not be a direct correlation, reduce the cost, but I think that this position will be very tuned into the JPIA.
Okay. Any other comments? Anything from the audience? Thank you, Mr. Tanner. We have a motion. May I have a motion to adopt the resolution?
I'd like to make a motion to adopt the resolution.
Okay.
I'll second that.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
He didn't say anything.
Oh, did you not want to vote? Did you not vote?
Well, I just have a comment. So I'm just a little confused as to the process. We're trying to get our budget negotiations, our budget process going, and we're adding positions before we even discuss the budget. So it just seems a little backwards to me. That it would have been nice if we had a meeting, say a month ago, where we're talking about our budget, and then we're saying, look, we're going to add new positions and start, in the context of a budget. So that's my complaint. I'll vote yes, with that reservation that I think we're kind of piecemealing the budget out now, because we're not doing it as a total exercise. We've added 4 positions now, and we have not had a budget meeting yet. So I will vote yes, but it's with those reservations. Thank you.
Okay. Do we need to do a roll call vote, or no?
I think everybody's voted
Okay.
yes, so I think
Okay.
you're fine.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, now we're down to council member reports, comments, and requests for future agenda items. I don't have anything, Council Member Schnapps.
Yes, thank you. So I do have 2 things coming up on whether it's part of the updated or the budget discussion or something before. I think that we've been looking at updating our business license tax, right? And so as I see that part of revenue generation and maybe new categories, et cetera, I'm wondering if we can put that on an agenda, as an agenda item in the future.
Yeah, what we'll do is have, probably 6 or 8 months ago now, we contracted with the business license arm of HDL, the same HDL that does a lot of other things for us. And the goal for them is to have a ballot measure ready to go for the November 2020 election that will update our business license, our whole program. Even if we're not trying to get a whole lot of new revenue from it, we need to update and modernize our business license because it's kind of a 1960s, 70s model. But we can have them come and talk about where they are in their process, because at the time that we signed the contract with them, it was still probably more than 2 years away from the November 2020 election. But now that we're into the spring of 2019, that will start gearing up a little bit. So
I think it fits appropriately because we're looking at a 2-year budget, right?
yeah, we're going to propose another 2-year this time. So yeah, that one is, they've been contracted. They're working away slowly on it as we look at that November 2020 goal. But it would be a good idea to have them come and present in the meantime.
Yeah. And then one other thing is that I'm going to be the guest speaker at the Friends of the Library annual meeting coming up on Cinco de Mayo, May 5th. Wow. The program is at 2 p.m. And if Mayor Brogue is not back, we do need somebody to swear the group in. I'll be speaking about my Cristero Revolution book and really about the process of actually writing a book too.
Very good. Councilman Gama.
Yes. So at the first or second council meeting I attended, at this portion in the meeting, I believe I asked to get on the agenda a discussion about one-time money, how we're going to spend it, where we're going to do with it, and my recommendation is to funnel it to the trust for the unfunded liability for a pension obligation. And also to have a discussion of leasing versus selling city properties. And I think my colleagues up here all agreed, and it has yet to make it to the agenda, and it concerns me a little bit because some of these issues are coming forward in some of the projects that are out there. And so I guess what I'm asking, what I would like to ask now is, can we clarify the process for getting things on the agenda, please?
Sure, we'll go back and look at, I know as part of the orientation for the new members, we provided some information on how you get an item on the agenda. I can tell you that the city manager basically has the final say on the formation of the agenda each time. And what the debate is, what role does the council have to get formal approval from a majority of the members to then have something brought back on the agenda under this item, council members' reports, comments, and requests for future agenda items? Or can an individual council member request that of the city manager, and the city manager puts it on the agenda when the timing works? I can tell you on your request, that's about one-time money. That's a perfect discussion to have during the budget process, and we'll be having the workshops in
May.
A month and a half from now, our first one.
If I could, there's a project in the works that may generate one-time money. So I think we should have the conversation long before we receive that money. And so my fear is that suddenly the building on Industrial Way is going to be sold, the money's going to be received, and we have not had that discussion. So that's what I'm trying to establish. Like, let's have a discussion. Let's seriously look at our unfunded liability and our pension obligation, and let's talk about one-time money, because our track record over the last 20 years, you sell properties, the money goes to general fund, and the money disappears. So that's kind of the reason why I really would like us to have that conversation long before we're presented with one-time money from sales of property or the like.
Okay. Councilman Rollins?
In light of some of the recent, of the agenda item that was taken off, it just made me think a little bit. With the many people in the community that have done so much for the community for so many years, and the desire by the community to recognize these people, one of the things that I came up is that there is no lack, or there is a lack of any kind of formal process on developing criteria for these well-meaning people and how we're going to recognize them. And I want this whole thing to be a very positive process, not a divisive process per se. And so is there a way that we can, I don't know whether it's developing a subcommittee or lending it off to the eventual development of the Citizens Advisory Commission, whatever that may be, Bill, but is there some way that we can kind of, so that when we recognize people, it'll be a positive thing for those people that should be recognized, really. And so I guess there is a lack of a formal process, and I really want to be able to recognize people that are well-deserved of that. So
I think with that, though, there could be differences in different categories, and we have to look at all the other groups that do recognize people. So Rich, you just can't leave out and just say it's just going to be the City of Port Hueneme and the council members that do this, but you have to look at the chamber, you have to look at the Navy League, you have to look at Friends of the Library, you have to look at the Bard Mansion, you have to look at the museum, and all these different groups that actually do recognize, and I know that the city partners with many, if not all of them, to recognize citizens in the community for what they've done. So some of that process already exists.
So there is probably a very elaborate process, group of people that recognize people. Perhaps if there's any gaps, I don't know, maybe we need to look at the gaps, I don't know.
I think, again, I keep pushing the strategic planning process. Do we, because that's the opportunity to identify the gaps and look at processes that need to be updated or changed or developed. Do we have a calendar or an estimated timeframe when the strategic plan will be?
Yeah, I've just been in touch with Christine Grimm in the last couple of days. We expect that before the end of May, we'll have the first kind of a organizing meeting, then that will then generate the timeline. She estimated about 6 months for the total process. So, yeah, we're getting very close.
Okay. I'm putting a lot of eggs in that basket.
Yeah, that's all right.
It could be one hell of a process.
Yeah. Okay. I did want to also let the council know that at a previous council meeting, I brought up the issue about vaping and flavored tobacco getting to underage teens. And I don't think there's such a thing as overage teens, but so that was redundant. But to high school aged and junior high school children, students, and I've asked the city manager to help develop an ordinance that we can pass to address that issue. So that, just to give you a heads up, that will be coming down the road sometime.
Right. Yeah, we've already got an internal staff meeting, just kind of a kickoff meeting established, and then we'll start talking about timeline for when it actually comes to the council for your first review.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other comments? Anything from our audience? We will be moving into a continuation of public comment. If there's any comments from the audience, you're invited to come on up. Okay, having no speakers then, we'll move on to adjournment. It's 9:05. I'd like to call adjournment to this meeting, and our next meeting will be Monday, May 6th. Thank you.